Albert.
Albert.
Einstein! May I have your autograph, sir? I want to be a scientist just like you.
Hello, may I help you?
Albert Einstein. Your reputation precedes you. We respect the true rebel. Speak!
Natura naturans. Everything is connected. It's an idea I've been considering for a while now.
You know, Ron, you directed the pilot. Explain the challenges and the opportunities in broadening the exploration of Einstein beyond the E equals MC squared and other formulas that most of us might have had a tough time connecting with.
Well, most enticing were the opportunity to delve into all these aspects of Einstein that you don't know. I mean, as a young guy, he was a free thinker, very bohemian, very romantic. This is not like John Nash from Beautiful Mind, an introvert who hides out. He loved his music. He loved women. He loved nature. And that, what is that? That's physics. That's the physical world. And you know, his determination to understand just kept driving him. So it was the epitome of curiosity that was fueling him. And over the years, I'd looked at treatments for movies about Einstein and a script about Einstein many years ago, and I never felt that the narrative served the character in the right way for a 2-hour movie. And when I read Noah Pink's script, his hour, that came from Gigi Pritzker's company, Odd Lot,
right?
And then I read Walter Isaacson's book, and it was full of those kinds of surprises, like understanding Einstein's libido, and it's not just for fun or it's titillating, or it describes him as a complete human being.
The thin line between genius and madness, you know, when you consider it, is that powerful intellect the equivalent of a superpower, or is it a burden?
And that's the double-edged sword, and I hope that this series, particularly having the time to let you look at, the entire reach of his life, I'm not sure it answers the questions,
yeah.
But it certainly dramatizes it, including later in his life, and you can imagine what Jeffrey Rush did with Einstein in those years, looking back at what he'd gained, what he'd achieved, what he still wished he could achieve, within his field, but also his life, the relationships that had managed to somehow thrive in some way, and what they meant to him, and the ones that were had been lost, and damaged along the way. So it's a very humanistic story.
What was the eureka moment in this one, in a way to make this guy breathing and living and embraceable?
It was Einstein, even more than Nash, was a visualist. Mm-hmm. And this is a great advantage. So in his writing, in Walter Isaacson's book, he describes some of the thought experiments. So Einstein would have eureka moments. There would be a moment where he's looking at a clock and suddenly a new idea is broken through, or he's looking at coffee and looking at particles or trains, elevators, and things like that were cues to him. Very cinematic. And so it was in my episode, what I was endeavoring to do was not only launch the Jeffrey Rush, Johnny Flynn combination. They're both in my episode, and I needed to get that balance right. The relationships, the pressures on both of them, mm-hmm. What was similar and what was different once he was famous and versus when he was a young man struggling. But also to try to get that visual aesthetic established, a cinematic style, an editing rhythm, and a look. And Matthias Herndl, great job as the cinematographer, really great. And he'd shot all the episodes. But it was really an interesting challenge, including the thought experiments, and to come up with something. And actually, in my episode, we show a finished thought experiment that he has years later when he's kind of like a Zen master and you feel like he can kind of conjure these things. And then we have what we're depicting as kind of his first eureka moment. And visually, we tried to deal with that in a way that was related to what you'd see later, but more rudimentary. E equals mc squared opened the door to other physicists to explore it, although it was never something he wanted to actively work on. But, you know, again, it's a human interest story. It's about his psychology as much as anything else. And he was an absolute pacifist. And so when the time came, when they began discussing the bomb, he was adamantly opposed. In fact, he'd had a friend of his, who we depict this as well, who, Fritz Haber, who had ultimately developed a poison gas and used it to try to protect Germany during World War I. And, you know, that broke Einstein's heart, that his dear friend had used his scientific power in that way. So when this came around, it was sort of his worst nightmare. But he also knew, while he had barely managed to escape Germany, but had successfully done that, he also knew that they were working on the bomb. And friends of his were coming and reporting and saying, they're making headway. They're making headway. You've got to do something. And so he was part of the group that reached, you know, FDR and encouraged him to begin the research. And then, now I'm kind of giving away the show, but a lot of you probably know this. He desperately tried, once there was not going to be a bomb on the German side, he desperately tried to get them to not drop it on people, test it. And he was a part of a group that fell on deaf ears.